My name is Edie Escher. I'm 29 years old, and last Christmas, my father looked me straight in the eyes and called me foolish for accepting a gift from my grandmother. That gift was a check for $5 million. He ripped his in half. My mother did the same. My sister tossed hers into the fireplace and recorded it as the paper curled in the heat. My brother crushed his beneath the table like it was nothing more than a used gum wrapper. I was the only one who carefully folded mine, slipped it into my purse, and said, "Thank you." The next morning, a bank manager closed the office door behind us, asked me to sit down, and said 4 words I have never forgotten. For the rest of that year, my family tried to take back the very thing they had mocked, and the lengths they went to changed everything I thought I understood about the people who shared my name. Before we go any further, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to Christmas Eve, to the final holiday dinner my grandmother ever made for us. My grandmother never locked her front door, not once in 47 years. And that December, her house smelled exactly the way it had the first time I visited her when I was 4 years old. Oak smoke drifting from the fireplace, banana bread cooling on the butcher block, and something sharp underneath it all. Something I didn't know how to name until much later. I drove up the hill in my old Subaru with a paper bag full of apples from the tree I had planted behind my rental house. She was waiting at the door in her corn-yellow sweater and the apron she had worn ever since her hip first started bothering her. She kissed my forehead the way she always did, one hand resting against my jaw, like she was quietly making sure I was still the same Edie. "Tell me about your class," she said. She asked me that every Saturday, and every Saturday she truly meant it. We sat at her kitchen table with mismatched teacups, and I told her about Daniel, a 3rd grader who refused to speak during group work, but could write paragraphs so honest they stayed with me long after I read them. She listened with her whole face. Then she asked, "What do you think Daniel needs?" "Patience," I told her. She nodded and said, "Then give him Saturdays." I told her about the bed frame I had bought at the flea market, an old spindle bed missing one drawer. She laughed into her tea and said it was probably haunted by a farmer who would strongly disapprove of my reading habits. Her hand trembled a little when she set the cup back down. I pretended not to notice. After that, we knitted for a while. She was working on something small and gray, but she wouldn't let me see it. I was struggling through a scarf I had started back in October and should have finished weeks earlier. Outside the kitchen window, the cardinal she fed every morning landed on the feeder, took one seed, and flew away, exactly the way he always did. She watched him like he was someone she had been expecting. When I left, she walked me onto the porch and pressed a thick envelope into my hand. Inside were 2 crisp $10 bills for gas. She gave me the same kind of envelope every month. I never cashed them. I kept every one in a shoebox under my bed, because what she was really giving me was never just gas money. I didn't know it then, but that was the 3rd to last Saturday afternoon I would ever spend with her. I drove back down the hill whistling. My mother never called to ask how I was. She called to tell me how she was, to find out what I had, and to decide whether she needed some of it. She caught me on the drive home, about 10 miles outside town, with my turn signal ticking inside the dashboard like a tiny metronome. "Edie, honey, are you visiting the old lady again?" That was what my mother called my father's mother. Never Grandma, never Sylvia, always the old lady. "I go on Saturdays, Mom," I said. "Every Saturday?" She sighed the way she always did when she wanted me to feel unreasonable. "She's fine, sweetheart. She has her pension." My older brother, Grant, was with her. I could hear him chewing something in the background. "Edie," he said, "I need a ride to Dan's garage on Monday. Truck's acting up again." "I have class Monday, Grant." So, then afternoon. While I was still on the phone, my sister Holland texted me. She lived an hour away in a bigger town with a husband she posted about constantly but rarely spoke of in real life. Her message said, "Hey babe, can you float me 200 just for this week? I'll pay you back, promise." Then came 3 emojis. My mother kept talking over the silence. "Christmas dinner. Your father wants roast. Make sure she doesn't spend hours cooking this year, Edie. She gets so tired, and then she just sits there looking at all of us." No one asked whether my grandmother was feeling all right. No one asked if her hip had gotten worse. No one asked why her hand might have shaken when she poured tea. I realized I had been quietly waiting, hoping one of them might ask. Just once. And there, on a snow-wet county road, I made a small decision I would not fully understand until much later. "I'll see you Christmas Eve," I said. "Edie," my mother added, dropping her voice into that careful tone she used when she wanted advice to sound like concern. "Don't let her talk you into moving in. She has her pride, but she'll take advantage of yours." I ended the call. My father hadn't even been on the line, but I could hear him anyway. The way you can hear an old clock in a house you grew up in, even when no one mentions it. For years, he had warned me not to let his mother fool me. He used words like that often, as if kindness always had a hidden hook in it. But I had never seen my grandmother try to fool a single person in my life. The first promise my grandmother ever asked me to make was not about saving her. It was about keeping her secret. She told me on a Saturday near the end of October, out in her garden, while we were cutting back rosemary for the winter. The light in the garden was low and golden orange, the kind of light you only see in a place that has been cared for by the same hands for 40 years. My grandmother set her shears down on the bench and lowered herself beside them more heavily than usual. "You remember Dr. Priya?" she asked. "Dr. Okafor? Of course. I went to see her on Tuesday." I waited. I had learned a long time ago that my grandmother shared things when she was ready. Trying to hurry her was like trying to hurry a tomato into ripening. "It's in my pancreas," she said quietly. "It's advanced. I've known since July." For a second, the whole bench felt like it shifted under me. I didn't cry. I'm still not sure why. Maybe some part of me had already known for months, the way you can feel a season ending before a single leaf has fallen. "Treatment?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I want to spend the time I have here, in this garden, at my kitchen table, with Meg on Wednesdays, not in a room hooked up to machines." "Grandma, I am 82, Edie," she said. "I have had a long, full, very interesting life." Then she took my hand. Her fingers were cold, but they were steady. "I am not afraid," she said. "I am sorting things out." She pinched a sprig of rosemary from the bush and pressed it into my palm. The scent of it has stayed with me ever since. "There is one thing I need to ask you," she said. "Anything. Don't tell them." "Grandma, I want Christmas to be Christmas. I don't want it to turn into a final farewell while everyone is still sitting at the table. I don't want your father rehearsing some grand speech over dinner." She gave me half a smile. "I want roast chicken and bad wine. I want one more year of pretending he is still the man I raised." Then that old spark appeared in her eyes, the one that always meant she was about to say something you would remember for the rest of your life. "Besides," she said, "I have a few things to hand out first. This Christmas is going to be very interesting." I did not sleep that night. 5 days later, it was Thanksgiving. 1 month after that, it was Christmas. And nothing my grandmother said was ever accidental. Every person in my family walked into her house that Christmas Eve carrying a wish list in their mind and calling it love. My father arrived first, stomping snow from his boots like he was claiming the room just by entering it. Richard Usher had the kind of posture that had carried him through 30 years at the machine parts plant. But 3 months later, even that posture would not be enough to save his job. He hung his coat on the best hook. Then he opened the refrigerator without asking. My mother came in right behind him, already handing out compliments that did not sound like compliments at all. "Oh, the tree is darling this year." But she wasn't admiring the tree. She was studying it. I watched her eyes move over the garlands, the ornaments, and the silver star my grandfather had soldered back in 1974. I could almost see her adding things up. Grant brought his girlfriend, who looked far too young for him, though she wasn't. He barely greeted our grandmother. He did, however, say hello to me. "Still teaching those kids, huh?" he asked. "When are you going to get a real job?" He grinned like it was a joke. It wasn't exactly cruel, and somehow that made it worse. Holland arrived last, phone already lifted, recording a video for her followers. "Cozy grandma vibes, my loves. You have to see this fireplace." She did not hug my grandmother. She leaned in, kissed the air beside her cheek, then went right back to finding her best angle. My grandmother moved slowly between the stove and the table in her corn-yellow sweater. She did not say much. She simply watched her family with that calm, careful expression I had seen at gatherings for 30 years. The expression of a woman who had stopped being surprised long ago. At one point, she caught my eye and smiled. She looked like she was sharing a private joke with someone who had not arrived yet. Margaret Yarrow, my grandmother's best friend since 1974 and the owner of the used bookstore on Elm Street, stopped by with a jar of honey and stayed for 10 minutes. Before she left, she touched my arm in the hallway. "You are the only one she talks about," Meg said. "I hope you know that." Bing Crosby played from the little kitchen radio, skipping the same beat it had skipped since 1997. Nobody fixed it. Nobody ever had. The turkey fat hissed in the pan, and my grandmother pulled a small wooden box from beside her chair. She placed it on the table so quietly that no one even noticed. That night, my grandmother handed out 5 identical envelopes, and by the time the roast had gone cold, 4 of them had been ruined right in front of her. She waited until everyone had eaten. Then she stood slowly, one hand resting on the back of her chair, and cleared her throat in that small, precise way she always did before saying something important. My family kept talking. They always kept talking. "I have something I would like to give each of you," she said. Grant rolled his eyes at Holland. Holland rolled hers right back. Grandma opened the wooden box. Inside were 5 cream-colored envelopes, all unsealed. One by one, she walked around the table and placed an envelope beside each person. Mine came last. When she set it down, she gently touched my shoulder. My father opened his first, because my father opened everything first. I watched his face change from expectation to confusion to something tight and hard. Inside was a check. It was from First National Hollow Ridge. It was written in my grandmother's slanted blue handwriting, and it was made out for $5 million. Grant laughed before he had even finished reading his. Then he leaned over. He saw the number. Then he laughed even harder. "Grandma, is this a joke?" Grant said. "Are you making us play Monopoly now?" Holland giggled and held her check up toward the light like it was a piece of costume jewelry. For one brief second, my mother's face changed. She looked almost like a little girl who had been handed something kind and had no idea what to do with it. Then my father spoke. Loud, flat, certain. "It's fake. Don't be ridiculous." He dropped his check onto his plate, and gravy began soaking into one corner. My mother slowly tore hers in half and placed both pieces beside her wine glass. "Mother, really," she said, "this isn't funny." Grant crushed his into a ball and flicked it under the table, and Holland, Holland stood up, walked over to the fireplace, and dropped hers into the flames. The corner caught first. I watched the number 5, with 6 zeros behind it, darken, curl, glow red for a second, and vanish. My grandmother did not blink. She only looked at me. So I picked up my check, folded it once, and slipped it into the inside pocket of my purse. "Thank you, Grandma," I said. She nodded, just once. No one else even noticed. I drove home that night, gripping the steering wheel the way you hold on to something solid when the whole world feels unsteady. By then, the snow was falling hard. The windshield wipers moved in their uneven rhythm, right then left, slightly offbeat. After 4 winters with that old car, I had somehow learned to find the sound comforting, so I counted it as I drove. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The same way Daniel, one of my 3rd graders, counted his fingers whenever the room became too much for him. My grandmother had just watched 4 people from her own family mock her gift right in front of her. And she had not blinked. She had only looked at me. She was not confused. She was the sharpest person I had ever known. She read the Sunday paper from front to back and wrote notes in the margins. She beat Meg at bridge every other week and bought her a chocolate bar on the weeks she lost. She had once spotted a mistake on my tax return from memory. And 2 weeks before Christmas, out in the garden, she had asked me a question that had seemed strange at the time. "If you had $1 million, Edie, what would you do first?" I had laughed. "I don't know," I said. "Probably buy new supplies for my class. We're out of dry erase markers again." She had nodded like I had given the correct answer on a test I didn't know I was taking. When I got home, I placed the check on my kitchen table and stood over it beneath the yellow overhead light. The paper felt heavy. When I tilted it, the security pattern shifted like oil moving across water. The routing number matched First National Hollow Ridge, the bank I had walked past almost every day of my adult life. The signature was my grandmother's. The same slanted signature I had seen on every birthday card since I was old enough to read. Then I turned the check over. On the back, in that same blue ink, written in her slow, slanted hand, were the words, "For the one who still comes on Saturdays." I sat down on the kitchen floor, and I stayed there for a long time. The check remained on the table above me. Outside, the snow did that quiet nighttime thing where it makes the whole world feel muffled, distant, and strangely close all at once. In the morning, I would go to the bank. Not to use it, just to ask. The manager at First National Hollow Ridge had known me since I was 16, and I had never seen his face change the way it did that morning. His name was Benedict Strom. He had a mustache he had kept long before mustaches came back into style, and there was a small plastic horse on his desk that I had always assumed came from a child who had grown up years ago. He smiled when I walked in. A minute later, he was not smiling anymore. "Mr. Strom," I said, "I'm sorry to bother you the day after Christmas." I pulled the check from my purse. "I just wanted to verify this. My grandmother gave it to me last night, and I wasn't sure." I slid the paper across the desk. He looked down at it. His smile paused. Then something shifted behind his eyes. He picked the check up with both hands, and his face changed in a way I had only ever read about in books. All the warmth seemed to leave it. "Edie," he said, using my name with the careful tone people use when they already know something you don't. "Can you come with me for a minute?" He stood. I followed him past the tellers, past the Christmas wreath hanging near the vault, and into a small private room with a long table and no windows. He held the door open for me. Then he closed it behind us and turned the little latch. "Have a seat," he said. I sat down slowly. "Is it real?" I asked. He sat across from me. He folded his hands and looked at the check. Then he looked at me, then back at the check. "Edie," he said carefully, "have you read what she wrote on the back?" "Yes." "Okay." He took a slow breath. "Your grandmother came in during the first week of November. She moved funds into a special account. She had 5 of these prepared. I was the one who printed them, Edie. They are as real as the chair you are sitting in." I counted backward from 10, the way I always told Daniel to do when the world started feeling too big. Then I fixed my eyes on the little plastic horse sitting on the corner of Benedict's desk. "Ma'am," Benedict said, his voice suddenly very formal, "I need you to understand this clearly. This is real. All of it is real." He paused. "And this is only part of it." I stared at him. "There is an attorney named Halverson who will be contacting you. I am not supposed to say anything beyond that." I walked out of the bank with $5 million in my account, and somehow, I already knew that money was not going to be the thing that changed my life that week. My grandmother had been wealthy for longer than I had been alive, and the only person in our family who had ever thought to ask about her financial advisor was the teller who handled her monthly checks. I drove straight from the bank to her house, still wearing my winter coat, with the smell of photocopier paper and stale coffee from Benedict's back room clinging to my sleeves. She was in the kitchen. The coffee was already made. She was not surprised to see me. In 29 years, my grandmother had never once looked surprised to see me. "You went to the bank," she said. "Yes." "Was Benedict kind to you?" "He looked terrified." She smiled into her cup. It was the chipped one with the cardinal on it, the cup that was older than I was. Then she pushed a second cup across the table toward me. "Sit down, sweetheart." So I sat. "Your grandfather left me $400,000 in 1998, she said. "That, along with the house and the garden. I did not know what to do with any of it. I was 55. I had been a music teacher for 30 years. I had never bought a stock in my life." "So what did you do?" "I went to the library," she said. "I read. I wrote letters to a man in Chicago. He had written a column in a magazine I liked. His name was Mr. Smith." She took a careful sip of coffee. "He wrote back. We exchanged letters for 17 years. I never met him in person. He passed in 2015. She paused. "Then he left me 40% of his firm." "Grandma." "I have roughly $40 million, Edie, give or take a market day." I set my coffee down. The cardinal painted on the cup stared back at me with one chipped eye. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" "Because nobody ever asked." She said it without bitterness. She said it like she was talking about the weather. "Your father asked me once, back in 2003, if I needed him to manage my money. I said no. He never asked again. And he did not ask because he wanted to help. He asked because he wanted control." She looked at me for a long moment. "I am not required to hand over my life to someone who cannot tell the difference between those two things." Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I did not give them money last night, Edie," she said. "I gave them one last chance to ask me why." And they didn't ask. It took exactly 112 minutes for my family to stop calling the check fake and start calling it theirs. Benedict had to make a routine verification call. He contacted my father because my father's name was still attached to an old shared account from 20 years earlier. Benedict did not give him details. He simply said a transfer had posted. That was enough. The first call came while I was still sitting in my grandmother's kitchen. Then another. Then another. My phone lay face down on the table, buzzing again and again. 32 times in 45 minutes. I counted because I could not think of anything else to do. Holland's messages arrived in a flood. I need my check. I changed my mind. It was an accident. Edie, baby, can we talk? I have to pay my storage unit. You don't need that much. Be fair. Grant's voicemail was much louder. You give that back. That is family money, you ungrateful kid. You hear me? Then came my mother's voicemail. She cried the way she always cried when she wanted her tears to sound like proof. Soft, careful, with a tiny catch in her voice at the end. Edie, sweetheart, you don't understand what you're doing to this family. I have been so patient with you. I have never asked you for anything. I looked across the table at my grandmother. She was completely calm. She was eating a piece of toast and watching me with the mild interest of a woman observing a storm she had predicted long before the clouds rolled in. I'm going to turn this off, I said. Good, she replied. The knocking started 40 minutes later. My father. I saw his truck pull up through the kitchen window. He came up the walk with that particular speed he used when he wanted to sound reasonable on the outside, while everything underneath him was boiling. My grandmother stood slowly and walked to the front door. She did not open it. She stood behind the glass. My father knocked hard. Then he tried the handle. Mom, open the door. Richard, she said through the glass. It is December 26th. This is not a good time. You gave her $5 million. I gave each of you $5 million. 4 of you destroyed it. Mom, Richard, go home. She did not raise her voice. I will see you when I see you. Then, for the first time in 47 years, my grandmother turned the lock. My father stood on the porch for a long time. Then he left. My grandmother came back to the table and picked up her toast. Well, she said, that has begun. The week my grandmother injured her hip was the week I stopped pretending I was going to have more time with her. It happened in the yard on a Tuesday in mid-January. She had gone outside to scatter seed for the cardinal. She stepped onto a patch of ice hidden beneath the snow and went down. She was out there for 40 minutes before Meg, driving past on her way to the bookstore, noticed the front door standing halfway open and stopped. The hospital wanted to keep her there. My grandmother wanted in-home care. And in-home care was what she got. She had completed the paperwork 3 months earlier, and Halverson had already notarized every page. I requested a leave of absence from Briar Hollow Elementary. The principal, a quiet woman named Mrs. Osgood, looked at me for a long moment from across her desk. Then she said, "Take whatever time you need, Edie. Come back when you're ready." So I moved into my grandmother's spare bedroom, the one with the pressed flowers on the wall and the quilt her mother had made by hand. I placed a baby monitor on her nightstand. Theo, the gym teacher, who was a good man and nothing more, brought my things over in his pickup truck. He carried the boxes inside, set them down quietly, and did not ask me a single question he had no right to ask. My father came by once. He stayed 20 minutes. He told my grandmother she should let Grant take her to his place. She looked at him and said, "Richard, I am home." He did not come back after that. Every night I read to her. She loved Willa Cather, especially My Antonia, the copy her mother had given her as a wedding present. I read slowly. She closed her eyes. Sometimes she corrected how I pronounced the name of a prairie town. Sometimes she simply drifted off. The honey lemon water on her nightstand would chill around the edges overnight because the radiator was old, the walls were thin, and winter had a way of finding every crack in that house. Every morning when I changed the glass, I noticed something with a small, frightened tenderness. My hand was smaller than hers had been, and it would never grow into the kind of hand that could hold a whole family together. That winter, both of us had become smaller in our own ways. Near the end, on a Thursday, She asked me to open the top drawer of her dresser. Inside was a brass key on a leather loop. She placed it in my hand. "When Halverson calls you," she said, "give this to him. He will know what it opens." "Grandma." "Not yet, Edie," she whispered. "But soon. And that is all right." My grandmother left this world the way she had lived in it, on her own terms, without making a fuss, in a room that smelled like old books, wool blankets, and home. It was Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026, at 5:47 in the morning. I know because I looked at the small travel clock she kept on the nightstand. It was the kind with a ticking second hand, the kind a teacher's husband had given her on their honeymoon in 1962. It never kept perfect time, and she never replaced it. She had been quiet for 2 days. The morning before, she had squeezed my hand and said, "Edie, I am so proud of you." After that, she did not say another word. I had been dozing in the chair beside her when I woke to the sound of the furnace clicking off in the basement. It clicked off, and the whole house became very, very still. And somehow, not with my mind, but with something deeper than that, I understood that she was gone. Her hand was still in mine. It was still warm. I did not cry right away. I just sat there. I listened to the morning. The radiator knocked once. The cardinal came to the feeder outside the window. He took one seed. Then he flew away. After that, I called Meg. She arrived within the hour. She sat on the other side of the bed and took my grandmother's other hand. She had been holding that hand, in one way or another, since 1974. Then I called my father. He answered on the 4th ring. I told him. For a moment, he was quiet. Then his voice cracked. And for one brief second, I thought maybe there was still something soft left in him. Then my mother came onto the line. Her first words were, "When is the service going to be, Edie? I have something on the 10th. I hung up. The service was that Saturday. My grandmother had left written instructions for everything. She wanted her corn-yellow sweater. She wanted to be laid beside her husband in the small cemetery behind the Lutheran church she had never attended a day in her life. She did not want Richard to speak. She wanted Meg to read a poem. Everyone came. Everyone cried loudly. My father wore a black suit that no longer fit him the way it once had. My mother held onto his arm like she was the one who needed carrying. Holland recorded the procession from behind her sunglasses. I saw the post later. She had added a soft filter around the edges. The caption said, "Healing." I did not record anything. I did not cry until that night. I want to pause here for just a moment. If you have stayed with me this far, and if you have ever lost someone who loved you more deeply than you thought you deserved, please give this story a like. And in the comments, tell me their name. I read every single one. I ask because the part that comes next is the part I was not sure I would ever be strong enough to say out loud. And having you here makes it a little easier. Stay with me. Let's go back. My father called the attorney before the cemetery staff had even finished their coffee. Halverson told me that later, because Halverson revealed things in his own time, and because, among other things, he was unexpectedly funny. He said my father had left 3 voicemails by noon on the day of the service. Every single one asked the same question. When would the will be read? Grant came to my house the next evening. He walked in without knocking because we had grown up in a house where no one knocked. Then he sat on the edge of my couch in his funeral suit and asked, without even pretending to ease into it, "Do you know who she left the house to?" "No, Grant." "You were there every week. She must have said something." "We didn't talk about that." "Come on, Edie." "We talked about my kids at school. We talked about her garden. We talked about bridge. I don't know what is in her will, and I don't care what is in her will. He stared at me for a long moment, the way Grant always stared at people when he was trying to decide whether they were lying. Grant had never been good at reading people. Then he got up, took a beer from my refrigerator without asking, and left. Halverson called me the following Monday. He was exactly the way I remembered him from the one time I had met him at my grandmother's kitchen table. Tall, slow-moving, dressed in a gray suit, with a voice that sounded like a cello string being played in another room. "Miss Usher," he said, "your grandmother retained me for many years. There will be a reading of her will at my office on February 20th at 10 o'clock in the morning. All immediate family members are named. I would like you to be present." "All right." "Edie," he paused. "There is a safe deposit box here in my office that she arranged for. During the reading, I will ask whether you have a key." "I have it." "Good. Mr. Halverson, may I ask you something?" "You may." "Did she tell you what is in the will?" He was quiet for a long time. "She did, yes." "Is it going to surprise anyone?" He gave one dry little laugh. "Miss Usher, it will surprise every single person in that room except you and me. And even you, I think, just a little." The reading was on a Friday. I wore a gray dress and drove into town believing I knew what was about to happen. I was completely wrong. When my father heard the will, he used the exact same words he had used the night he dismissed the check. "Is this a joke?" Then he said it again, louder this time, as if the room had failed to understand him the first time. Halverson's conference room had a wood-paneled clock hanging on the wall, and that clock ticked louder than any clock I had ever heard. My father sat on one side of the table. My mother sat beside him, with one hand resting on his sleeve. Grant sat across from them. Holland sat at the end, scrolling on her phone until Halverson asked her to put it in her purse. Meg sat beside me. I had asked her to come. My grandmother had asked her to come too. Halverson opened a dark green folder, put on his reading glasses, and did not look at any of us. "This is the last will and testament of Sylvia Marigold Usher, dated April 14th, 2022. Witnessed by Margaret Yarrow and Dr. Priya Okafor. Notarized in my presence." He read the opening statement. Then he read the list of specific gifts. The cardinal teacup went to me. The bridge set went to Meg. The silver star my grandfather had soldered went to the Lutheran church. The piano went to the elementary school. My father's jaw was already locked tight. "The principal remainder of the estate," Halverson read, "including the family residence at 114 Linden Hollow Road, the surrounding 23 acres, all investment accounts, and all remaining personal effects, valued at approximately $40.2 million after the 5 gifts already distributed." The clock kept ticking, louder and louder. "The testator leaves the entirety of this remainder to her granddaughter, Edie Rosemary Usher." No one spoke. The clock ticked again. For 3 full seconds, my father's face did not change at all. Then he stood up. "Is this a joke?" "Mr. Usher," Halverson said, "please sit down." "Is this a joke?" "It is not a joke. It is a legal document. Please sit down." My mother made a small sound, the kind of sound a teacup makes when it is set down too hard. Grant's eyes were fixed on me. Holland had already pulled her phone back out. Halverson continued reading in the same steady voice. "I leave this to my granddaughter Edie. She is the only one who visited me on Saturdays. She came for no reason other than love. She cared for me near the end of my life. She never once asked what I had." My father slowly sat back down. He stared at the table. Underneath it, Meg reached for my hand. I held on. The legal complaint arrived in the mail 4 days after the will was read, and before I even opened the envelope, I knew exactly which one of them had started typing first. It came in a heavy manila envelope. I smelled the paper. I do not know why. Stress makes people do strange things. The paper smelled like paper, but it also carried the scent of the office it came from. Toner, old leather, a room where too many people had been angry for too many years. The complaint had been filed on behalf of Richard Usher, Linda Usher, Grant Usher, and Holland Usher Briggs. They were claiming undue influence. They were saying I had pressured an elderly, unwell woman into leaving me her entire estate. I sat on my kitchen floor and laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when the only other option is to throw something. I called Halverson. He had been expecting it. "I will represent you, Miss Usher, at no cost," he said. "I owe your grandmother 3 decades of trust. Let me finish what she started." Then I called Theo. Theo was in his driveway, scraping ice off his car, and he answered on speaker. "Should I try to settle?" I asked. "Should I just give them something?" For a moment, he was quiet. I could hear the scrape of the ice against the windshield. "Edie," he said, "you did nothing wrong, and your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. Giving in would be the only way to dishonor her." "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." That was the whole call. That was the kind of friend Theo was. The next morning, my father sent an email. The subject line said, "Family meeting." The message said, "Edie, we need to sit down. This has gone too far. Dad." I forwarded it to Halverson. Halverson replied on my behalf, polite and professional, directing all future communication to his office. Holland started posting vague videos online. She sat in her car with no makeup and talked for 7 minutes about a family betrayal she could not discuss for legal reasons. Her followers rushed to comfort her. "Stay strong, Queen. Family is everything. I'm so sorry, babe." I watched 2 of the videos. I did not watch the 3rd. My grandmother had been laid to rest for only 18 days. The case would not be heard until October, Halverson told me. Probate moved slowly. Contested probate moved even slower. That meant I would have to live for 7.5 months with my family's names attached to a legal case against mine. I went back to work on Monday. Daniel was happy to see me. The safe my grandmother had given me the key to did not contain stocks or deeds. It contained proof that she had been paying attention all along. Halverson drove out to the house with me on a Saturday in May. The lilacs were just beginning to bloom. He walked through the rooms with the quiet respect of a man who had truly known the woman who lived in them. The safe was in the back of her bedroom closet, hidden behind a row of cardigans. He watched as I slid the brass key into the lock and turned it. Inside were 3 things. The first was a thick legal folder. It held the will, the notarized documents, and 3 capacity evaluations Dr. Okafor had completed over the years. Every one of them was clear. Every one of them was dated. Every one of them was signed. Halverson gave a small, grim smile. "Your grandmother," he said, "understood litigation." The second item was a bundle of letters. Every birthday card I had ever sent her was there, beginning with a crayon drawing from when I was 4 years old. She had kept all of them. She had labeled each one by year in tiny pencil writing on the back. The third item was a leather album. At first, I had no idea what it was. The album was green, with soft, worn corners, bound together with a shoelace she had clearly replaced at least once. I opened it right there on the floor of her bedroom. It was a journal, or something close to one. On every page, written in her slanted hand, there was a single entry. A date, a few words. Sometimes a pressed leaf, a feather, or an old ticket stub tucked carefully beside it. February 5th, 2015. Edie came. We read about the Nebraska prairie. She got emotional at the part with the plow. October 22nd, 2016. Edie came, brought apples, helped with the roof gutter. August 19th, 2018. Edie came, tired from her first week of teaching. We both napped. Every Saturday I had visited her was there. Every single one. Going back 10 years. Going back farther than I had even realized I had been showing up. 487 entries. I counted them later, sitting on the edge of her bed. On page 112, there was a faint brown tea stain. Under it, she had written, "Edie brought pie. I spilled. Much laughter." That was when I cried for the first time since the service. I cried into my own sleeve on my grandmother's bedroom floor, while Halverson stood in the hallway and kindly pretended to be interested in the view from the window. I was not walking into that courtroom alone. She had counted every Saturday. The judge who handled my grandmother's will case had gone to high school with her in 1962, and she said so twice before the hearing even began. Her name was Judge Bernadette Ames. She explained that she routinely stepped away from cases where the connection was more than a passing acquaintance. She and my grandmother had been classmates in a graduating class of 51. That, she said, was an acquaintance. She could hear the case. She stated it clearly in open court, and my family's attorney did not object. I think he knew he was not going to get anything better by waiting. Halverson was calm. He walked the judge through the will, the medical evaluations, and the witness statements one by one. Dr. Priya Okafor took the stand in a navy suit and spoke with the clean, precise calm of someone who had done this before. She had evaluated my grandmother 3 times, once in 2022 when the will was signed, once in 2023 as a follow-up, and once in 2024 because my grandmother had insisted on it. All 3 evaluations confirmed that my grandmother fully understood her decisions. The final evaluation had been completed just 11 weeks before she passed. Meg took the stand next. She wore her reading glasses and a small silver pin Sylvia had given her for her 50th birthday. "Your Honor," Meg said, "Sylvia Usher and I played bridge every Wednesday for 40 years. In her final week, she still remembered the hand I misplayed in September of 1987. She was still teasing me about it." Then Meg looked directly at my father. "She was not influenced by anyone," she said. "Sylvia was the most unpersuadable person I have ever known." Then my family's lawyer questioned me. I had been dreading that moment for weeks. I had rehearsed answers in the shower, in the car, while making coffee, while pretending to sleep. But in the end, I did not need any of them. "Miss Usher, did you ever suggest how your grandmother should divide her estate?" "No." "Did you discuss her finances with her?" "No, I did not even know she had much to speak of." "Did you ever encourage her to favor you?" "No, sir." "Then why, in your opinion, did she leave everything to you?" That question caught me unprepared. I sat there for a moment. I looked at Meg. Then I looked at the empty chair beside her, the one no one had taken. "I came because it was Saturday, Your Honor," I said. "That was the whole reason." The judge wrote something on her pad. I could not read it. Then she looked up. "The court finds the will valid as executed. The contest is dismissed. Plaintiffs are to bear the defendant's reasonable attorney's fees." Halverson gave my shoulder one quiet squeeze. I did not look at my father. Later, my father called me his worst daughter in front of a local journalist. By Tuesday, the Hollow Ridge Chronicle had printed the phrase as a pull quote. It happened in the marble hallway outside courtroom 3. I was walking with Halverson toward the stairs when my father came out of the restroom on the opposite side of the hall. He saw me. and something he had been holding back for 9 months finally came loose. "You are the worst daughter I have ever had, Edie." His voice echoed. Marble is not kind to anger. 3 people turned to look, including a young woman with a notepad and a press badge from the Chronicle. She did not look away. She simply made a small, deliberate note. I did not answer him. I kept walking. Halverson placed a hand gently on my elbow and guided me past. Grant followed behind us. "Don't you feel guilty?" he called after me. "Not even a little?" I stopped. Then I turned around. Grant had been my older brother for 34 years. He had pushed me into a pool when I was 6. He had helped me move 3 different times. He had borrowed money and never paid it back. He had shown up for Thanksgiving without calling first. He had stood beside my grandmother's casket with dry eyes. "No, Grant," I said. "Not even a little." Holland had been live streaming from inside the courtroom. The bailiff had asked her twice to put her phone away. She ignored him both times. Within an hour, the video was removed by the platform for breaking courtroom and broadcast rules. According to a comment she made later, she lost 7,000 followers in a single afternoon. She had crossed the line from grieving family member to public embarrassment in front of the very audience that had once paid attention to her. I drove home that afternoon, sat in the cold kitchen, and drank tea. Theo came by with dinner. He did not pretend he had cooked it. We ate in silence. The Chronicle article came out on Tuesday morning. The headline was careful and restrained. "Probate Court Upholds Contested Will in Usher Estate." The article itself was factual, but on the second page there was a pull quote printed inside a box. My father's words, exactly as he had said them. And there was one small detail in the final paragraph that I did not notice at first. Mr. Usher was laid off from his position at a regional parts manufacturer earlier this year. The manufacturer announced its closure in March. It was not a cruel detail. It was simply a reporter doing her job. But in a town like Hollow Ridge, people read every word. And small towns remember things for a long time, especially when someone turns their back on a gift in front of a person who does not have many tomorrows left. My mother's spa still had its grand opening banner hanging outside, even though it had been there for 2 years. The pink had faded. One corner sagged from the awning. She began losing clients in the 3rd week of November. Not all at once. First, a Tuesday regular stopped booking. Then a Friday regular. Then the woman who owned the flower shop across the street, a woman who had once known my grandmother through choir, walked past the spa for 3 straight weeks without looking inside. My mother called me in December. She cried and asked whether I could help. I said no, gently. Then she hung up. Grant's construction office, the one he had been running out of a rented corner of a warehouse, was taken back by the landlord in late January. He had fallen 3 months behind on rent. The landlord, who had gone to school with my father, had been patient for as long as he could. The local paper listed the filing in the back section, the way it listed all filings. People read the back section too. My father never found another job. He applied to 3 places and did not receive a single callback. He was 58 years old. He had spent 30 years at one manufacturer, and now he was back in the job market, trying to become useful to a world that had already moved on without asking his permission. My mother moved back in with her sister in Ohio that November. My father stayed in the house where I grew up. He did not invite anyone over. And then there was Holland. The Chronicle article had been picked up, briefly and modestly, by a regional human interest blog. That led to a comment thread. And that comment thread led to a message from a woman in Akron to Holland's husband, Marcus, about certain credit card balances that did not seem to match the household income. Marcus had already been suspicious for a year, so he checked. He found $80,000 of hidden debt. He filed for divorce in April. By the end of May, Holland had moved in with my mother in Ohio. By then, she had lost around 12,000 followers and whatever influence she had once imagined she had over our father. Theo and I were sitting at his kitchen table when I read the text from Meg telling me about the divorce. Theo looked at me. I looked at him.
"You didn't do this," he said.
I know, but we sat with it anyway. The thing no one in my family ever bothered to learn about my grandmother was that she had been quietly helping feed their children's school for 40 years. I found out on a warm Saturday in May while going through her desk. I had decided not to sell the house. I couldn't. I had told Meg, who had been running her bookstore out of a cramped little storefront on Elm Street, that she could use the front 2 rooms as a second location. She cried. Then she agreed. Then she brought boxes. We were clearing drawers together when I found the notebook. It was small, made of soft leather, and tied with an old brown shoelace. It slipped out from behind the drawer liner in the bottom right side of my grandmother's desk. The kind of hiding place someone uses when they do not want to be caught being kind. I opened it. Every page was a year, and every year had a list. 1985, milk program, $840. 1986, milk, $900. Textbooks, $1,200. 1987, milk, $950. Library, $400. It went on like that for 40 years. The final entry was from November of 2025. Milk, books. A new set of drums for the music classroom. At the bottom, in my grandmother's steady handwriting, was the running total. $284,600. Briar Hollow Elementary. My school. The school where I taught. The school where Daniel, my 3rd grader who barely spoke during group work, drank a small carton of milk every day at lunch because it was part of what the school called the nutrition program, a program fully funded each year by a private, anonymous donor no one had ever met. I sat down on the kitchen floor with the notebook in my lap, and I did not move for an hour. A pressed leaf slipped from the back cover. An oak leaf. Under it, she had written, Benji's first day, October 1984. I did not know who Benji was. I asked Meg later. Meg looked at me for a long moment and said, "Your father. He was a kindergartner." My grandmother had started feeding the school the year after her son began attending it, and she had continued through his childhood, through his teenage years, through his graduation, through his marriage, through his children, through his grandchildren. She had helped feed the school that had helped feed all of us, and she had never told a single one of us. Not even me. Not even the person who spent her days teaching inside that same building, using dry erase markers she did not know her grandmother had quietly made possible for years. My mother sat at my kitchen table in February and, for the first time in my life, looked like someone who was not performing. She had come without calling. She had crossed the line from a grieving relative to a public embarrassment, right in front of the same audience that had once rewarded her attention-seeking. I drove home that afternoon, sat in my cold kitchen, and drank tea. Theo came by with dinner. He did not pretend he had made it himself. We ate in silence. The Chronicle article came out on Tuesday morning. The headline was careful and plain. Probate court upholds contested will in Usher estate. The article itself was factual, almost dry. But on the second page, there was a pull quote inside a box. My father's words, printed exactly as he had said them. And there was one small detail in the final paragraph that I did not notice at first. Mr. Usher was laid off from his position at a regional parts manufacturer earlier this year. The manufacturer announced its closure in March. It was not a cruel detail. It was just a reporter doing her job. But in a town like Hollow Ridge, people read every line. And small towns remember things. especially when someone turns away from a gift in front of a woman who was running out of tomorrows. My mother's spa still had its grand opening banner hanging outside, even though it had been there for 2 years. The pink had faded. One corner hung loose from the awning. She started losing clients in the 3rd week of November. Not all at once. First, a Tuesday regular stopped booking. Then a Friday regular. Then the woman who owned the flower shop across the street, a woman who had known my grandmother through choir, walked past the spa for 3 straight weeks without even looking inside. My mother called me in December. She cried and asked whether I could help. I said no, gently. Then she hung up. Grant's construction office, the one he had been running out of a rented corner of a warehouse, was taken back by the landlord in late January. He had fallen 3 months behind on rent. The landlord, who had gone to school with my father, had been patient for as long as he could. The local paper listed the filing in the back section, the way it listed every filing. People read the back section too. My father never found another job. He applied to 3 places and did not get a single call back. He was 58 years old. He had spent 30 years at one manufacturer, and now he was standing in the job market like a man from another century, trying to prove he still belonged somewhere. My mother moved back in with her sister in Ohio that November. My father stayed in the house where I grew up. He did not invite anyone over. And then there was Holland. The Chronicle article had been picked up briefly by a regional human interest blog. That led to a comment thread, and that comment thread led to a message from a woman in Akron to Holland's husband, Marcus, about certain credit card balances that did not seem to match the household income. Marcus had already been suspicious for a year, so he checked. He found $80,000 of hidden debt. He filed for divorce in April. By the end of May, Holland had moved in with my mother in Ohio. By then, she had lost around 12,000 followers and whatever influence she had once imagined she had over our father. Theo and I were sitting at his kitchen table when I read the text from Meg telling me about the divorce. Theo looked at me. I looked at him. "You didn't do this," he said. "I know. But we sat with it anyway." The thing no one in my family ever bothered to learn about my grandmother was that she had been quietly helping feed their children's school for 40 years. I found out on a warm Saturday in May while going through her desk. I had decided not to sell the house. I couldn't. I told Meg, who had been running her bookstore out of a cramped storefront on Elm Street, that she could use the front 2 rooms as a second location. She cried. Then she agreed. Then she brought boxes. We were clearing drawers together when I found the notebook. It was small, made of soft leather, and tied with an old brown shoelace. It slipped out from behind the drawer liner in the bottom right side of my grandmother's desk. The kind of hiding place someone uses when they do not want to be caught being kind. I opened it. Every page was a year, and every year had a list. 1985, milk program, $840. 1986, milk, $900. Textbooks, $1,200. 1987, milk, $950. Library, $400. It went on like that for 40 years. The final entry was from November of 2025. Milk, books. A new set of drums for the music classroom. At the bottom, in my grandmother's steady handwriting, was the running total. $284,600. Briar Hollow Elementary. My school. The school where I taught. The school where Daniel, my 3rd grader who barely spoke during group work, drank a small carton of milk every day at lunch because it was part of what the school called the nutrition program. A program fully funded every year by a private, anonymous donor no one had ever met. I sat down on the kitchen floor with the notebook in my lap, and I did not move for an hour. A pressed leaf slipped from the back cover. An oak leaf. Under it, she had written, Benji's first day, October 1984. I did not know who Benji was. I asked Meg later. Meg looked at me for a long moment and said, Your father. He was a kindergartner. My grandmother had started feeding the school the year after her son began attending it, and she had continued through his childhood, through his teenage years, through his graduation, through his marriage, through his children, through his grandchildren. She had helped feed the school that had helped feed all of us, and she had never told a single one of us, not even me, not even the person who spent her days teaching inside that same building, using dry erase markers she did not know her grandmother had quietly made possible for years. My mother sat at my kitchen table in February, and for the first time in my life, looked like someone who was not performing. She had come without calling. She had gotten on a bus from Ohio, then walked the last mile from the station through gray slush in a coat that had been expensive 6 years earlier and was now simply a coat. She knocked on my door the way a stranger knocks, twice, softly. I let her in. I made tea. I did not say much. She had lost weight, but not the way she used to when dieting was something she announced to everyone. She had lost weight the way sorrow takes it from you, without asking. Her hands trembled around the cup. I read her letter, Edie. Okay. The one Mr. Halverson gave me after the reading. I didn't open it until last month. I couldn't. Okay. She tried to drink her tea, then set the cup down because she had started crying. Silently this time. A new kind of crying. She said... My mother swallowed. She said she remembered a Tuesday in 1994, before you were born. She had come over, and I had been short with her. She said she understood. Her own mother-in-law had been difficult with her, and she didn't want to pass that down. My mother pressed her fingers against the edge of the table. And then she wrote, I forgive you, Linda. I have forgiven you for 30 years. My mother lowered her head onto her arms at my kitchen table. I let her cry. I did not pat her shoulder. I did not tell her it was okay. I just made another pot of tea. When she finally looked up, her makeup was gone, and her face looked like it had before I was born. For 1 second, I was looking at a version of my mother I had never met. Edie, she said, I would never ask. But the spa, 100,000. I could save it. I would pay it back. I would. I looked at her. I did not feel angry, not really. There was nothing sharp left in me, only a tired kind of tenderness. Mom, I said, I'm not giving you money. She nodded. She had expected that answer. But I am going to set up a fund, I said, in Grandma's name, for college, for any grandchild I may have someday, and for any child in Hollow Ridge who needs it. That is what I'm going to do with her money. That is what she would have wanted. She nodded again. Then she stood. She hugged me. A small hug, 1 second long. Then she left. I'm not angry anymore, Mom, I said at the door. I just don't know you. She did not turn around, but she nodded. I gave notice at Briar Hollow Elementary on a Tuesday. By Friday, I had rented a small cottage in a town in Maine I had never set foot in. Mrs. Osgood did not try to talk me out of it. She had known me for 4 years. She had watched me come back from leave. She had watched me go through a trial. She had watched me keep teaching a classroom full of 9-year-olds as if the ground were not shifting under my feet every morning. She accepted my resignation with a small, dry nod. Then she said, You will be a good teacher wherever you go, Edie. You already are. I set up the foundation with Halverson, $20 million, the Sylvia Usher Scholarship Fund. It would cover tuition, books, and lunch programs for any student in Hollow Ridge County who needed help, from elementary school all the way through college. Halverson cried quietly in his office when I signed the papers. It was the only time I ever saw him cry. He had loved her. I had always known. I did not sell the house. I couldn't. Instead, I gave Meg the right to use it for the rest of her life as a bookstore. She named the new branch Sylvia's Second Reading. She painted the sign herself. I applied for a fourth-grade teaching position at an elementary school in Newberry Cove, Maine. It was a town I had chosen from a road atlas because the name sounded like something my grandmother would have liked. I did not visit first. I had one phone interview. They offered me the job 2 days later for $51,200 a year, which was close to the salary I had always had and the salary I intended to keep having. My father called once in June. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message asking whether we could meet. Just the two of us, just for coffee. He said he had things he wanted to say. I listened to the voicemail 3 times. Then I wrote him one email. Dad, I am not going to stop loving the people you should have been, but I cannot keep writing the letter for you. Take care of yourself, Edie. I did not send any of the versions where I tried to explain more. I did not send the version where I forgave him. I could not be dishonest with him, not even then. I packed what fit in my car, and somehow everything that mattered fit. The first cup of coffee I drank in Maine was the worst cup of coffee I had ever tasted, and I laughed out loud in the parking lot. I had driven for 2 days through New Hampshire, along the edge of Vermont, and up through the long, slow rise into Maine. The Subaru had a cough in 4th gear that I had been pretending not to notice for 3 years. My grandmother's corn yellow sweater was folded on the front seat beside me because I had not been able to pack it away in a box. I stopped at a roadside gas station somewhere south of Augusta. They had coffee in a pot that looked like it had been sitting there since the Carter administration. I bought a cup. I drank it. Objectively, it was a disgrace, and there I was, standing in the parking lot, laughing. A real laugh, the kind I had not made in a year. It startled a man who was putting air in his tire. I reached Newberry Cove in the late afternoon. The town was small in the way only small towns can be. 1 main street, a post office, 2 diners, a feed store that had somehow become a yarn shop, and a bakery that was closed on Tuesdays, as if Tuesdays had personally offended it. The cottage I rented sat on a bluff about half a mile outside town. Gray clapboard. Weathered shutters. A porch with 2 rocking chairs, one of them missing a spindle. The landlord had left the key under the flower pot, exactly as promised. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. For a moment, I just stood in the hallway. The cottage smelled like cedar and sea air. It was empty. It was quiet. The kitchen had a cast-iron stove I did not yet know how to use. The living room had 1 window facing the Atlantic and an uneven little floor that creaked when I crossed it. I carried my grandmother's corn yellow sweater into the living room and draped it over the arm of the only chair there. A green wingback left behind by the last tenant. 1 sleeve slipped over the side, hanging exactly the way it used to hang over the arm of my grandmother's kitchen chair. I stood there looking at it for a long time. That evening, when I checked the mailbox, there was 1 envelope inside. Meg's handwriting. Inside was a card and a short letter. Edie, Sylvia knew you would end up somewhere like this. She told me 10 years ago. She said, Edie is a coastal soul. It just has not told her yet. Welcome home, Meg. By the next June, I had a 4th-grade classroom that faced the Atlantic and a yellow cat who believed my grandmother's sweater belonged to him. The classroom was on the 2nd floor of Newberry Cove Elementary, a brick building from 1936 with floors that squeaked in 8 very specific places. By October, my students had learned to skip over every single one on their way to the pencil sharpener. There were 18 children in my class. One of them was a quiet girl named Rosie, who did not speak during group work, so I gave her patience. I gave her Saturdays in the form of extra 20-minute conversations after school on Tuesdays. By May, she had started raising her hand. The first awards from the Sylvia Usher Scholarship Fund went out in April. 47 students. I read every application myself. 2 of them were children from the Briar Hollow lunch program my grandmother had supported before either of them had even been born. I cried quietly over both files. Then I approved them both. Meg drove up in early June with a mason jar of jam from the garden. She stayed for 3 days. She sat on my porch, read a paperback, and spoke only when speaking improved the silence. She was 80 years old. And sitting there on my porch, she looked like a woman who had decided to live to 100 purely out of principle. Richard sent me a birthday card on July 14th. It was the first birthday card he had sent me in 10 years. The card was plain. "Happy birthday, daughter." Inside, in his cramped handwriting, he had written 4 words. "I hope you're well." I did not write back. But I did not throw it away either. I put it in a kitchen drawer. I do not know why. I think someday I might. The cat arrived in late June, skinny, yellow, 1 torn ear, and a steady, suspicious way of looking at people, as if he had already reviewed their character and found it lacking. He walked in through the screen door I had not latched properly. Then he climbed onto the corn-yellow sweater in the wingback chair and went to sleep. I did not have the heart to move him. I named him Cather. He slept on that sweater every night. Every morning, I had to ask his permission to borrow it. He would look at me through one half-open yellow eye, as if he had inherited the memory of my grandmother directly and was merely allowing me temporary use of what clearly belonged to him. On a Saturday in August, I sat on the porch that belonged to me and wrote a letter that did not need to be mailed. The sun was setting over the bay. It set 10 minutes later there than it used to set behind my grandmother's hill. For some reason, I had been keeping track. That night, I sat through every one of those 10 minutes the way you sit through the credits of a movie you are not ready to leave. The letter was to her. I told her about the classroom, about Rosie, about the 8 squeaky floorboards, about the day the principal brought donuts, about Cather and the sweater, and the way he looked at me like he had been left in charge. Then I told her I had finally understood something. I had not won because I had money. I had money now, yes, but most of it was not mine. Not really. And it never would be. I had won because I had known how to sit quietly beside someone when it mattered. Because I had come on Saturdays for no reason except love. Because I had put the check in my purse instead of turning away from it. Because when she had asked me, in her garden that October, what I would do with $1 million, I had told her I would buy dry erase markers for my class. And she had looked at me like I had given an answer she had been waiting her whole life to hear. I folded the letter and placed it inside the small wooden box she had kept beside her chair on Christmas Eve. The same box I had brought with me to Maine. Then I closed the lid. I stood up. Through the open window, Cather looked at me with the patient disapproval of a creature who was ready for dinner and could not believe I had forgotten. "Coming," I said. Then I went inside. If this story reached you, and if there has ever been someone in your life who loved you more deeply than you knew how to accept at the time, tell me in the comments. Tell me their name. Tell me what they taught you about quiet kindness. I read every single one, and I carry those names with me. And if you want to hear another story about boundaries, family money, and the women who finally choose to walk forward instead of staying where they are not valued, the next one is waiting for you in the description. It begins with another check. Come with me.